Unscripted, unrehearsed, welcome to Talking Element. Episode 10 of Talking Element.
Double digits.
Double digits. Thanks for joining us. Today we're joined by Sandy Stewart. Hello, Sandy.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Would you mind giving a brief introduction for anybody who may not know you?
Well, I am a wife of 49 and a half years, mother of 4, grandmother of 9, great-grandmother of 3. I've been going to Element since 2008. I was raised in a Christian home. I came to know the Lord at a very early age due to the godly parents He gave me.
You know, you also left out that you do all of our slides for us.
Oh, well.
You know, so whenever a slide's on the thing, that's typically you.
Last week, Aaron talked about living simply, and one of the ways that he recommended doing that was making a family. And you came into our minds. I was wondering if you had any thoughts last week about that and your journey in making a family as a way to honor God.
Reminded me of what some of my fellow students in high school said, that I had never wanted to be anything except a mother. It really is a place where you can share the gospel with the next generation. I think that's a key thing for me. It has been in all of my life, that the next generation, it's not just my generation, it's the next generation.
We are talking about Acts Part 2, Week 43, the very last in our Acts Part 2 series. Where did Paul go from here? And before I ask you to do a recap, I want to say thank you for the past 43 weeks, plus Part 1, and we're above 80 now, right?
No, 79.
79.
It was, 43 and 36.
Did it go where you thought it was going to go? Did it?
I don't think anything really ever goes where I think it's going to go, because when I start, you know, I have an idea of like 8 months before I write it, I have this process. You know, I read through what I'm going to teach through, and then I do another thing in my quiet time, and I go back and read that. So it's probably 2 years before I even write out how the messages are going to go. And then, so 8 months before I started writing Acts, I had written down how I thought it would go. And then I went and started to do it. And as you go, you see the themes as they start to come out and get played out a little bit differently. And so you start to focus on different things. And every once in a while, you know this, we've changed the title of the sermon because of the direction of where it went.
So with that, would you mind giving a brief overview of 43?
So today is actually kind of Acts 29 verse 1, because what we did is we finished the entire book of Acts essentially last week, and this is, how does it all tie together? Where is God sending us to now? What is He telling us to be? And we are called to be this sent people, and so it's important for us to understand what the gospel of Jesus Christ is. So we spend a lot of time today looking at that, speaking about that, what it means to be a people who herald and proclaim that to the world, that we have such a great motivation to speak of this gospel because we have been saved by God's good work Himself. And we don't have to worry about what the world in the end can do to us, because we are secure in what God has already said over us. So we can step out and speak the gospel in ways that connect to those around us, even if they don't even sometimes want to hear it.
I appreciate you explaining herald and someone being the messenger of good news. So I wanted to kind of briefly ask, what things in life other than Christ do you seem easy to herald? And you mentioned TV earlier, and that's probably a big one for me as well. What do you find easy to explain to others, your excitement?
Probably the things that excite me the most outside of the gospel would be books and scrapbooking. I love them both. And
are there TV shows about scrapbooking?
There's plenty of YouTube shows.
Oh. I talk about guitars. I'm in a guitar forum. I talk about amps. I talk about electronics. I get excited about a lot of stuff.
Why is it's easier to talk about those items in life than the gospel in a lot of situations?
I think it's not an offensive thing if you talk about a TV show. Like, it's weird. Like, disagreeing about a TV show is one of the few things you can disagree about today, and not cause a major rift in a relationship. You talk about anything else, from your political candidate or your stance on a proposition or whatever it is, and all of a sudden it goes bad quickly.
It's changed a lot in my lifetime because I'm significantly older than you. When I was a kid, I could invite my friends at school. I could give out little flyers for Good News Club, where we invited kids once a week to come to a friend's home, and we did Bible stories and crafts and things, just kind of like E-Kids does on Sunday. And I was allowed in public school to hand out little flyers about that and stuff, no problem. And then you couldn't do that. It's become much harder in my lifetime to speak the gospel into the lives of people every day. It's a little bit
well, that kind of relates into what we're starting on Tuesday night is our Element University. It's how culture at one point had certain level beliefs that everybody had. Like we had a belief in God and an afterlife and what was good and what was bad.
Very
and
true.
now today that's kind of changed. It's not really the same anymore. And so when you say Jesus or you speak about the gospel or church or things like that, people already have these preconceived ideas of what you mean, even if you don't even mean that thing. And so you have to understand where they're coming from to even begin to have the conversation. Because if you watch TV shows, the way Christians or the Bible are portrayed in TV shows is nothing of what true Christianity
terrible.
is. It is. And so I think that also makes it harder to have some of those conversations because you're trying to find a way to say something, hopefully in a way that they understand, but many times they don't. So many people just kind of back off from it.
Well, and then I think there comes for me an inadequacy feeling of if I have to explain so much to understand what I'm saying here, I don't know if I know enough, to be able to explain it properly to help someone else understand at least the bedrock, so that then I can say the thing I want to say. Sandy, going back to explaining the gospel to the next generation, what does that look like?
For the most part. I know there are children who are exceptions, but especially when you're raising a family, they shouldn't have to be unaware of love. When you talk about God loving you, hopefully you have raised them in an atmosphere where they know what love is. They know about love. We forget to remind them that God forgave us too. And I try to remember that with my kids. I don't know that I did often enough, but God forgave me some pretty awful things. And I forgive you for what you did, but there are still consequences. So teaching both the love and the consequences of God is slightly different in a family and with a child. Children, for the most part, I think, have a more innate understanding of the big concepts than we do.
I think that's totally true. I think kids naturally get and understand things in the scriptures that adults naturally want to rebel against.
Yeah.
So how do you, when talking to somebody, explain the gospel and the implications of the gospel? And do you sometimes jumble them up, or is it easy to make them distinct?
For me, I typically, if I'm going to share with somebody, it's the implication almost first, because the way it is now, people aren't looking for me just to in a normal like preaching. Sure, I'm supposed to give information, but if I'm in a friendship type situation, it's the first thing I don't want to do is just give information. I want to look at what's going on when something's happening with somebody, and then take the implication of what the gospel means for their life, and then be able to start there of what's going on with them, and then how Jesus can speak to that and why the gospel is good news there. So it's almost a backwards thing of how I approach people of where they are and maybe going through something that's hard. My dad at times can get very frustrated about certain things that are going on in the world that he doesn't agree with, and he and I don't agree on some things that he doesn't agree with. And when he gets so frustrated and angry at certain things, I start in the place of that anger of, you're really angry at this, and so you want to double down on this person is going to fix this. But haven't we had this whole conversation about how people are the problem in the first place? And so what if we looked at maybe a solution that wasn't people-centered? And that would be what God has done to rescue and save us. And I kind of bring that back from where he starts and that back around to the gospel of God's rescue. What if we just trusted what God actually did for us? And then our lives will begin to live out of that. And I think the problem is nobody tends to live our lives centered on the gospel first. We lived it and how we react to everything. But if we went here and this is what God has done, then these things could result.
I'd have to say I probably do a similar thing in occasions when I have talked with people about the gospel. For me, it's easier to talk to someone that I know, and knowing the situation in life, the things that are hurting them or bothering them or making them angry. I think it's easier to approach it from the side of these things are so human, and I don't know a human being who can fix this. The only person I know who can help in this situation is the God who saved me from my horrible sin. If God can save me, if God can give me a confidence that he loves me and he can take control of my life and lead it in the way that he wants, in a better way, and leave me feeling the peace that I feel, isn't that something that makes more sense to know about? Let's look at this or that. Let's look at this scripture.
I think a lot of it depends, where our focus tends to lie, and our focus is either inward or outward at others, but it's almost never drawn back to God himself. And I think that's part of our job, is to try and help draw people's focus back to God himself so our lives can be translated through what God has done.
What's your hope? So you talked about Acts 29, right, which isn't in the book, or is in the Bible. It's
not in the Bible.
It's the next chapter, right? What would your hope for your Acts 29 life to look like?
For me, it's been a challenge to speak the gospel into the lives of my grandchildren, whom I do get to contact, and the children and grandchildren that I only get to communicate electronically for the most part. They don't write letters anymore. It's a lost art. One of my granddaughters had a baby in August. That was a scary thing during this time. We talked about God and the fact that he was in control and he could be with her through it all, even if they wouldn't let her husband in. And I think you made me a little braver through this sermon series, because I really felt God saying, I'm sending you. You're the one. You are the mom, the grandma, the great-grandma. You need to say something, because the next generation
Be the matriarch.
So, yeah.
Step in there.
I'm the great old granny. But that God has burdened my heart for the next generation. And I hope God allows me to stay long enough to see more of my family come to know him personally.
It's my hope that I always have for Element, that we would understand the gospel better. That when we ask somebody, what's the gospel? They'll be able to say, oh, this is the gospel. And they would just load out there, rather than when you say, what's the gospel? And everyone's like, what do I, that's what I'd like us to be, a people who understand the gospel enough that we know what it is. And then because we know what it is, we can understand what the implications of the gospel actually bring. And then that would then begin to change our lives because we understand it. What's the gospel? Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. It's what he did for you.
And that ends Acts for us. And we will be back next week talking about the Holy Spirit and our misunderstanding of the Spirit. And Talking Element will continue with and through that series as well.
What are we calling it? We're calling it the third wheel, because we treat him like he's a third wheel.
I like that title.
That's it for us. We'll see you next week. And what is the gospel? Spend some time defining that right now. Write it out, whatever your process is. Practice it and live it. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye. So
That's 89.
Oh, sorry. 40.
so yes, over.
Okay, can we do that again?
Almost 90.
So it's almost 90.
No, wait.
Yeah,
43.
40
3, 36.
and 30. 4 and 3 is 7, plus the extras.
40, right, 43 and 36 would be
Oh, okay, I'm
79.
sorry. You're right.
God, I thought I was going crazy. Oh my goodness.